Arachnophobia. Arachnophobia, or the fear of spiders, is one of the most common phobias in the world, rooted deeply in our evolutionary past. Our ancestors who could instantly recognize and avoid venomous arthropods had a much higher chance of survival and passing on their genes. Modern research shows that the human brain is wired to detect an eight-legged shape faster than any other object in the visual field. Even if you live in a megacity with no deadly spiders, your amygdala still triggers an immediate fight-or-flight response. Scientists have found that even infants show signs of stress when exposed to images of spiders, suggesting that this fear is not always learned. The chaotic movement of a spider's legs is perceived by our nervous system as an unpredictable threat that cannot be controlled. Interestingly, arachnophobia may also be a form of cognitive disgust, where the brain confuses fear of venom with fear of biological contamination. Thus, your fear at the sight of a tiny house spider is an echo of your ancestors' cries as they struggled to survive in the wild jungle. Acrophobia. Acrophobia, or the fear of heights, is a natural defense mechanism designed to protect us from fatal falls. Unlike other fears, a mild level of caution around heights is considered normal, as it is directly linked to our vestibular system. The problem for people with acrophobia lies in the conflict between vision and balance. The eyes see an abyss, but the body does not feel stable support. The brain interprets this mismatch as a critical error, causing dizziness, nausea, and even panic-induced muscle paralysis. There is a phenomenon called the call of the void, where a person at a height feels a strange urge to jump, something the brain may mistakenly interpret as a suicidal impulse. In reality, it is just an overly fast safety response trying to force you to step away from the edge immediately. Severe acrophobia can make even climbing stairs or crossing a bridge impossible, severely restricting freedom of movement. Fear of heights is your internal altimeter, sounding the alarm whenever gravity becomes your greatest enemy. Claustrophobia. Claustrophobia is an irrational fear of enclosed spaces, closely tied to the survival instinct in situations of limited oxygen. The brain of a claustrophobic person perceives restricted physical space as an immediate threat to life and an inability to escape. Interestingly, this fear can stem from genetic predisposition or early childhood trauma. Symptoms include a rapid increase in heart rate, hyperventilation, and an overwhelming urge to find an exit immediately. For some people, even a tightly fastened collar or being in a crowd can trigger a full-blown panic attack. In such moments, the brain essentially shuts down the prefrontal cortex responsible for logic and hands control over to the ancient reptilian brain. This state turns an ordinary subway ride into a fight for survival in a cramped cave with no chance to breathe freely. Claustrophobia reminds us that freedom of movement is a fundamental need of our biological nature. Trypophobia. Trypophobia is a specific fear or disgust triggered by clusters of small holes, bumps, or irregular patterns. Although not officially recognized by all medical associations, millions of people experience intense itching and nausea when exposed to such triggers. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that this reaction is linked to a subconscious response to dangerous animals with similar patterns. Additionally, such visual patterns in nature often signal infectious skin diseases or the presence of parasites. Our brain interprets these images as visual noise that overloads the visual cortex and triggers a protective rejection response. Interestingly, the reaction in trypophobia is more often based not on fear of death, but on a deep biological disgust toward abnormal matter. Even harmless things like bubbles in dough or a porous sponge can make a trypophobic person feel as if insects are crawling on their skin. This is an example of how our vision acts as a safety filter, protecting us from potential contamination hidden in the textures of the world. Social phobia. Social anxiety is not just shyness, but a paralyzing fear of being in the spotlight and subjected to judgment. In ancient times, being cast out of the tribe for wrong behavior was equivalent to a death sentence. Our brain still perceives a critical glance or group disapproval as an existential threat to our safety. This triggers the release of adrenaline, causing facial flushing, a trembling voice, and a complete loss of clear thinking. A person with social anxiety constantly replays their mistakes in their mind, creating an internal theater of shame that has little to do with reality. The fear that others will notice your insecurity creates a vicious cycle of anxiety that is extremely difficult to escape. It's important to understand that most people are too preoccupied with their own problems to closely analyze your missteps. This fear is simply an exaggerated social survival instinct trying to make you invisible to predators. Nyctophobia. Nyctophobia is the fear of darkness, or more precisely, of what might be hidden in the absence of visual information. For our ancestors, night was a time when nocturnal predators were active, against which humans were nearly defenseless. When we lose sight, the brain begins to fill the void with the most frightening images from our subconscious. Any rustle or creak of a floorboard is interpreted by the amygdala as the beginning of a deadly attack. This state of hypervigilance keeps the body under intense stress, preventing sleep and recovery. Interestingly, fear of the dark often fades with age, as the prefrontal cortex learns to suppress childhood fantasies. However, in conditions of complete isolation, nyctophobia can return even in adults as a basic survival instinct. Darkness frightens us not in itself, but because it deprives us of our main tool for controlling the world, our vision. Mysophobia. Mysophobia is a pathological fear of germs, dirt, and contamination that drives a person to perform endless cleaning rituals. Our immune system is a powerful army, but in a mysophobe, its intelligence unit operates in a state of paranoia. Any doorknob or bus handrail is perceived as a biological weapon ready to destroy the body. This fear is closely linked to the insular cortex, which is responsible for feelings of disgust and hygiene. Mysophobes often isolate themselves from society, avoiding physical contact and turning their homes into sterile bunkers. The paradox is that excessive cleanliness can weaken the immune system by depriving it of the necessary training against real threats. Fear of invisible killers is an ancient method of protection against epidemics that has gone out of control in the modern world. Mysophobia is an attempt to gain control over a world that is, in reality, 90% composed of microscopic life. Thanatophobia. Thanatophobia, or the fear of death, is the fundamental basis of nearly all human fears and anxieties. Our survival instinct is the most powerful program in our biological software, operating 24 hours a day. The fear of non-existence drives us to build civilizations, create works of art, and search for meaning in every moment we live. When we become aware of our mortality, the brain activates a mode of existential terror, trying to find a way to outsmart time. Most of our daily stresses are merely disguised forms of the fear that our time is limited. Psychologists argue that accepting the fact of death is the only path to true psychological maturity and peace. Thanatophobia reminds us of the fragility of life, urging us to value every breath and every connection with others. Ultimately, our fears are not enemies, but strict teachers that help us stay alive in this dangerous world.